I'm Nia Malika Henderson with Wonk Fix today. Joining me, Chris Saliza here in the studio with me, and Ezra Klein is in New York joining us via Skype. We see him here. We, of course, want to talk about tonight's main event. Of course, there are lots of basketball or football and baseball games going on tonight, but the real main event is the vice presidential debate. Yeah. What do you think the Democrats want out of this in terms of a headline Friday morning?
Well, let me first say I think you have your split between average, normal people who will probably watch some combination of the Major League Baseball playoffs or the Thursday night football game, and then the three of us and people like us
we will be
who will not only watch it, but we will spend time talking about it on web video. What do Democrats want out of it? Whatever the reverse of what they got out of last week's debate was. I think that they don't want a, Paul Ryan, wipes the floor with Joe Biden headline. I tend to think that's very unlikely. I actually think out of the four people, the two people running for president and the two people running for vice president, the most proven debater who's had the most time on this stage is Joe Biden. He's the person who's been on the national stage the longest. I actually think he is underrated a little bit as a debater. I thought he was, there was about 100 presidential primary debates on the Democratic side in 2008. I actually thought he was good in the role he had. His role was relatively narrow. I mean, the big three were Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Edwards. So Joe Biden didn't get a lot of speaking time, but when he did, he was good. So, my guess is that this is a debate that Democrats don't have to deal with the fall of what they had to deal with last week, which was this, what has happened? Panic, sky is falling. If you had to handicap it, I would give Joe Biden a little bit of an edge just because he's been here and done that before. And I think people are underselling him. I actually think the guy is a much better and more able debater than people give him credit for.
And polls actually show that people think that Ryan is going to win this thing, so he's going in Biden as a bit of an underdog.
Which is, by the way, quickly, the exact opposite. Ezra and the three of us talked about this last week. Everyone thought Barack Obama was going to win, which made Barack Obama not winning more newsy.
Ezra, what do you think in terms of Ryan going into this debate? What are his goals? What does he need to do?
Win, although I actually think Ryan's particular job has changed, right? Ryan now just needs really to not lose on some level because previously Romney and Ryan were quite a bit behind. After the last debate, they have some momentum. They clearly had a gain in national polls and some of a gain in state polls, although it hasn't been quite enough to put them over the top. I think that moves him to a more risk-averse position because he doesn't have to make up some huge gap. Their campaign, as a general point, doesn't need to run as risky a strategy as it potentially had to a couple of weeks ago when it seemed well behind and it wasn't clear what exactly could turn around the slide. But that said, one thing I think you see in debates is people come out, right? When you're just reading a speech, you can kind of be whoever you want to be. Over the course of an hour-and-a-half debate, it's hard to play a character for too long. And so even if Ryan, I think, wants to be risk-averse, even if Joe Biden, has his own strategy, at some point, these guys are going to come out and they're going to answer questions as of themselves. And so I think Paul Ryan is going to try to prove that Joe Biden doesn't take the deficit seriously, and Paul Ryan knows a lot about the budget, and Joe Biden is going to try to prove that Paul Ryan doesn't take the human consequences of his own ideas seriously, and he's sort of in abstract Randian land, but hasn't quite come down to earth where people are struggling. And you're going to see a collision between the two politicians that they actually are, even if the campaigns would like them to be two slightly different politicians than that.
So Ryan being Ryan, one of the challenges, this is a guy, loves numbers, he's a big wonk. Let's go to this numbers clip where he gets a little bit lost in the weeds.
Well, first off, the bill has 10 years of tax increases, about $500 billion, with 10 years of Medicare cuts, about $500 billion, to pay for 6 years of spending. Now, what's the true 10-year cost of this bill? In 10 years, that's $2.3 trillion.
Yeah, did you get that?
Well, Ezra and I may disagree. Ezra, why don't you go first, and then I'll go in. This is more anything.
This is more Ezra.
I'll come in with the politics. But
you go. Wonk it out. Ezra.
I just think so that clip is from the Blair House debate of healthcare, and I think we should note that moment for Paul Ryan, for conservatives, was a huge moment for him. That was a viral video clip for them. They loved him taking on Obama on the numbers. Now, I don't actually agree with a lot of what he said in that clip. And we did a debate, him and I, not a debate, did an interview right after that all about those numbers. And people can go look it up. It's my second interview with Ryan, and it's linked in my post on Ryan earlier today. But I think the idea that he got lost in the weeds there, that is exactly what conservatives wanted at that moment. They wanted someone to show that Obamacare's math didn't add up. And while I think actually Ryan's math had some problems there, it certainly seemed like Ryan was showing that. As a general point, I think Ryan's biggest danger here is trying not to be that guy. So far in the campaign, I think he's been a little bit less of a force than many would have expected, because the Romney campaign has held him back, and you particularly saw this in his convention speech, got a big backlash because it was sort of untruthful. It didn't appear to do any of the hard choice, tough budget guy stuff that he was known for. If he just tries to be an average politician, he's not that good at that. He's not going to do that well. I think he'd be well served to play to his own strengths and try basically to beat Joe Biden on the numbers and show that Joe Biden doesn't know what he's talking about. My understanding is Biden is, really trying to make sure that's not going to happen tonight.
What do you make of
against? But I think the idea that Ryan needs to fear the weeds. The weeds are what got him in 2 years from budget wonk nobody knew of to the vice presidential candidate.
Right. How do the weeds play in Peoria?
Well, I think first, I think Ezra is onto something in that I really do think it's important that you be who you are.
Right.
You try to be something. We saw this with Al Gore in 2000. It was there were
the earth tones and all the
iterations of who Al Gore actually was. I actually think, look, if you're a wonky guy who's into the numbers, that's right. This is why Paul Ryan is on the ticket. They could have picked Rob Portman, they could have picked Tim Pawlenty, they could have picked safer people. They wanted to pick him because he's the guy who they feel is the one to battle Barack Obama and the Obama ideas as encompassed by Joe Biden in this kind of battle of ideas. So I don't think you should walk away from it. I also think you have to be somewhat careful not to go. I actually didn't think the clip we played was that bad in terms of him talking. He's making the conservative case against Obamacare. I think he can do that. I think you start doing too much, not necessarily number talking, but too much Washington speak. That's a little more dangerous. Though I would say, look, Joe Biden was elected to the Senate when he was 29 years old.
They've got almost 6 decades
This is
between
the
them.
job that he has had his whole life. So, it is possible that both of them descend a little bit into that kind of Washington ease that I think you wind up losing people on. If the word cloture is mentioned,
baselines.
Right,
that's
exactly.
Right.
If we start, I think that's a potential danger for both of them. But I do think Ezra is broadly right about Ryan, which is don't try to be glib or, don't be who you are, because people sniff out a fake very, very quickly.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit about Biden. And Biden, folks know him as being gaffe prone, as a little wordy. He took on these charges in this clip here, the yes clip.
Senator Biden, words have in the past gotten you in trouble, words that were borrowed and words that some found hateful. An editorial in the Los Angeles Times said, in addition to his uncontrolled verbosity, Biden is a gaffe machine. Can you reassure voters in this country that you would have the discipline you would need on the world stage, Senator?
Yes.
And one of the things about Biden, and Ezra, you take this, is he hasn't made many gaffes actually in debates. Most of them have been, on the stump or in interviews. And what do you think he's going to do tonight? Is he going to be? One of the interesting things about tonight is that he's got a lot of high hopes riding on him, right? And I don't know if it's a danger to have an overly excited Joe Biden going into this debate.
Joe Biden knows it's a big night, and in particular, he had one of these in 2008. Remember, the Sarah Palin debate between her and Joe Biden was the most watched debate of that cycle, but the job was very different. As Biden actually said to John Heilemann, or some people around Biden said to John Heilemann, the worry there was to not seem condescending. It was not that Sarah Palin was going to outfox Joe Biden and really take him down on the substance. But I agree completely with what Chris said earlier in the broadcast here. Joe Biden's a very good debater. In 2008, I actually tended to think he was one of the best debaters on the stage, and that was particularly true on foreign policy, where he has something that really comes off well, which is a complete confidence in his own abilities on the subject. You might not think that is a merited confidence. You might disagree with him. But he, unlike a lot of Democrats who can get a little tenuous when talking about foreign policy, he was always just completely ruthless on the subject. He had that great line, what was it? A sentence for Rudy Giuliani is a noun, a verb, and
That's
9/11. he's been over time a very, very strong debater. So I don't expect that he will. Well, I'll put it this way. As Heilemann said, if you go back through Biden's career, you have a lot of moments like this one where he gets underrated and then performs. Whether or not he'll do that tonight is a completely open question, obviously. But in general, people seem to have an idea of a lovable, huggable, sort of goofy Joe Biden, kind of the onion Joe Biden. And yet there's some reason this guy was one of the youngest senators in the country when he was elected and is currently vice president of the United States. He knows how to play this game.
And just to add to that, I think if the knock on Barack Obama in last week's debate was he looked kind of diffident and glum, looked like he wanted to be almost anywhere else but where he was.
Disengaged, yeah.
Joe Biden, and he takes lots of criticism from the right and praise and some criticism from the left for this, but Joe Biden is not a guy who is going to lose a debate for lack of passion.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's all gut, he's all heart.
He's kind of all heart, and he's all kind of out there.
Yes,
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I actually think that is a good thing in the context of kind of where the race has gone in the aftermath of President Obama's debate performance, is that Joe Biden will make very clear that he is passionate and knowledgeable about these issues.
Right.
And to the extent that the critique on Obama was that he might be knowledgeable but that he lacked passion, that will not, I don't think, be a problem for Joe Biden. I think that's when he is actually at his best.
Yeah. And he seems to me to have a tendency, he can say things that really, I think, break through the screen, where it lands in people's homes and houses. I want to go
Which is so weird, by the way, because he's been in the Senate for gosh knows how long.
But I want to turn to this, the Biden family clip, when he talks about the tragedy of his wife and his child dying.
But the notion that somehow, because I'm a man, I don't know what it's like to raise two kids alone. I don't know what it's like to have a child you're not sure is going to make it. I understand, as well as, with all due respect, the governor or anybody else, what it's like for those people sitting around that kitchen table.
Is there any thoughts about that clip? And Biden sense that he can break through, he can speak to folks around their kitchen tables and feel their pain, to use that too often used cliche.
And I think he generally can. I mean, we should say the context for that clip is that when his kids were very young, his wife was killed in a car crash.
Right.
And I believe one of his sons was too, although I could have that wrong. And he had to raise two children on his own, two young boys on his own. So, but Biden, I mean, this is what he's good at as a politician. Biden is a politician who feels your pain. He's more of the sort of Bill Clinton school than the kind of cerebral, cool Mitt Romney or Barack Obama school, or for that matter, Paul Ryan school. In that way, one, I think, unusual thing about this election is on the two tickets, you have three quite cerebral, wonkish politicians, and really kind of only one politician I think you could identify as sort of an old school, backslapping, friend of the average man, a friend of the average man kind of campaigner. And that was in 2008 a big part of why Obama put him on the ticket. The idea was that Joe Biden could talk to a kind of voter, reassure a kind of voter that maybe would have a little bit of concern about Barack Obama. And he was very, very effective about that. I mean, Joe from Scranton, you talk about the sort of goofy reputation Biden has, generated in part by The Onion, of a guy constantly washing his Trans Am in the parking lot of the White House. But part of that reputation, I mean, what is behind that is this idea of Joe Biden as a blue-collar, regular guy who just loves this country and loves being vice president. And that's not a terrible contrast to be drawing in this election, or in particular this debate with Ryan, where what he is trying to do is suggest that these guys, they might have this big budget and they might have these bold ideas, but they haven't thought about how it'll hurt you and your family.
Ryan, of course, does have some of his own regular guy swagger. I want to play this gun clip when he is on the stump, I believe in Pennsylvania, and talking about both his religion and some of his sport.
Remember this other time where he was caught on video saying, people like to cling to their guns and their religion. Hey, I'm a Catholic deer hunter. I am happy to be clinging to my guns and my religion.
Yeah, it's interesting. That clip is, I've seen it lots and lots of times.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, but he does not seem super comfortable doing that. So I know he got a big applause on because it's about Barack Obama's comments in the 2008 election about certain people in Pennsylvania like to cling to their guns and their religion. It's very much a talking point on the conservative side, but it seems to me that this debate, if it does focus on policy, is a strong suit potentially for Paul Ryan in a way that feels as though he's doing the things that are expected of you to do as the vice president. I don't think it comes super naturally to him in a way that, to be honest, if you said to Joe Biden, you got a 20-minute speech in front of a union hall, we want you to attack Paul Ryan like crazy. The guy would not need a script.
That's
I mean,
right,
he would
that's
just kind of go and
Uh-huh.
do his thing. That kind of bashing stuff isn't as natural, Ryan. He's done a fair amount of it because it's what's expected of the VP. I'm interested to see tonight how much of the hits he takes at Biden and Obama are policy kind of hits, which are your softer hits,
right,
and how many of them are like veering into that semi-personal territory. My guess is, because it's what he feels comfortable with, he'll revert back to more policy-based attacks. But I'm sure the Romney campaign would love for him to take a few big swings too.
And this is a debate, 90 minutes, about foreign policy as well as domestic policy. Ezra, the administration has taken a lot of hits around their response around Libya. Can Ryan make up some ground in terms of the gap that that polls show where Obama is judged to be a much better leader in issues like terrorism and foreign policy?
I know this is not the answer I'm supposed to give, but I have no idea. Okay. I have no idea how good Paul Ryan is at arguing that kind of thing. I have no idea how much the Libya thing is penetrated.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've been trying to follow the arguments and counter arguments around the Libya thing, and I have found them somewhat confusing. It is still opaque to me who knew what when and what we're actually arguing about here. Whether the question is we should have had more security, or whether the question is that they shouldn't have been talking about riots for so long. It's a little, and this is, I'm not saying there's not a real issue here. It's just, to me, has remained a somewhat difficult argument to parse on both sides. It's kind of felt like there was a big attack from one side around Romney's initial comments, and then a kind of gleeful counterattack from the other side where they see an opening now. I don't know how much they'll want to get into that. I thought it was notable that in the first debate, you saw both Obama and Romney shy away from these kinds of debates that obsess Twitter, right? You didn't have Mitt Romney going after, you didn't build that, you didn't have Barack Obama talking about the 47%. These kinds of these political back and forth that you kind of need to be a little bit up on to know why they're so resonant, they didn't tend to come up. Now, if the moderator gives Ryan an opportunity, if she brings up the Libya thing, if it's something that Jim Laird pointedly did not do, is open up questions to those particular, ongoing controversies in the campaign. If the moderator tonight does that, it could be a different story. But if I were Ryan, my hunch is they're going to be very careful about trying to come at Joe Biden frontally on foreign policy, because if there is one thing that Joe Biden does well, and he did this well on the stage against Democrats in 2008 as well, it is say, you have no idea what you are talking about. I have met all 94 of these world leaders. We drink beer together every Friday night. And where you're coming from simply does not have an engagement with the difficulties of these questions. He's good at asserting that kind of a confidence. And my hunch is that if there's one particular trap they're going to be careful to have Ryan not walk into, it is one where Joe Biden makes it look like he is not ready on foreign policy, where he opens up ongoing concerns that Ryan just is not ready, because he doesn't have much experience on it, to be commander-in-chief in that way.
Yeah. I would say, just as like a step back meta point, first of all, I agree with Ezra. I don't know enough to offer a detailed opinion, but I would say I think we kind of the political class should be careful to say anything that Ryan or Biden do are going to kind of fundamentally reshape how people perceive Obama and Romney. Okay. I tend to think that, if you're a high school basketball player and you're really highly touted, you may like the assistant coach. It may help make your decision, but the head coach is the guy that you're ultimately deciding on. So I think we have a tendency to say, oh, well, if Biden says this, then Obama. I think we make those connections.
Yeah.
I'm not sure average
people
folks
make
do.
those
So
connections.
Look, I'll be watching it, live tweeting it, flooding the zone in every possible way.
It might not make a difference ultimately.
I just think we should be careful about it saying anything more than about Joe Biden and Paul Ryan, not say about Barack Obama and Mitt Romney.
Quick change of subject, the Nats.
Man, I'm hoping it could be bad. The game is ongoing.
I know it's on
a
right
huge
now.
sacrifice
Yeah.
that we're here.
We'll go right away and watch it.
If they lose and then we have the VP debate and I'm at work until midnight, it's a double whammy.
Yeah, this will be terrible. Ezra, you're a Nats fan, or are you? I don't know if you're Yankees. What are you?
The Yankees.
You're Yankees, okay. I know that
I'm a
Californian.
Californian.
Insofar as I'm a fan of anybody, it is the Nats. But I would be very, very cautious about offering a detailed opinion for fear of making myself look like a fool.
Yeah, no, I am the
Baseball's
same way.
not my strong suit.
Yeah, baseball, to me it's, it should be 7 innings. I
mean,
don't know
it's
why
not
it's
Duke
9.
basketball, right,
It's
Neil?
not Duke, exactly.
Just want to get that gratuitous
Yes.
shot in, Ezra. Sorry.
Well, thank you boys for joining
Thank
me.
you.
It's always a pleasure. And thank you for joining us for Wonk Fix. Enjoy the debate tonight.
Bye, all.